Hello everyone, this is Carl Shiflett, and in this short video, I'm going to give an introduction to the WPF XamDataGrid Control Configurator. Alright, so let's dive right into this. So here I've got my XamDataGrid. It's empty, it's in row 1 in my XAML, and let's go ahead and open the configurator. So like all configurators, to open them, you simply put the insertion point over top of the title of the control, or over here by its XML and you can see you get this little light bulb. So two ways to open the light bulb is you can click on it, and then you could then again click on this name here, or you can just get your light bulb and press Control dot and then press Enter, and that will open up the configurator for you. And all configurators open up exactly the same way. And I'm going to maximize this to make it a little bit easier for us. So with the XamDataGrid configurator, before it can render a XamDataGrid, what it needs is data. So grids and charts, they need data before you can see the control, right? So right here, we have some text here that advises us that we have required fields. We can see that the data source is red, and it's telling you that you need to set up a binding for it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and click on this property marker. That's how we set up data bindings in WPF. Create data binding. And then what happens is when this project, when the configurator got launched, it actually went out, did reflection over your project, and figured out all of your classes. And then what it does, based on the view that you're in, the XAML file, it tries to find a view model that matches it. And if it can, it'll just select it, and then it'll list right here all the properties on that view model that you could bind to. Now, over here where it says change binding context, let's say that it can't figure it out. Then what it'll do, it has a list over here of all the view models in the project. And how does it get the view models? Well, it's looking for types that end in the word view model. So that's how this works. Otherwise, you can always go through here and you can drill through your assemblies and you can use your binding context that way. Or you could pick a class in here and use that as your binding context. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to do orders. So I'm going to pick an observable collection of order. I'm going to create my binding. And what will happen is that it goes out and it goes and creates a whole bunch of sample data, all right, behind the scenes. And I know you can't see it, or you can barely see it. You see these little 5 records that are here? So these little 5 like triangles? Okay, so there's really 5 rows of data that are data bound, but we don't have any fields set up yet, right? So if I come down here and I click on the order layout, and this is not a class on adding fields, I'm just going to do this. We have a much more detailed class later. I'm just going to add a couple of fields here. So I'm going to come down here and add like the customer first name and customer last name and the order ID. All right, so we'll just add those. So you could see that as I added the fields, what happened was, because the data was already pre-bound, these fields already had data assigned to them, and when we created fields for those in the XamDataGrid, we don't call them columns, we call them fields, but you could interchangeably use those words. I'm just using the words that are the terminology that's used within the XamDataGrid itself. So you could see here that once we added these automatically got lit up. All right, so now let's say that you're done configuring your XamDataGrid, and to save your XamDataGrid and get back to your XAML, you press Apply Close. So I'm going to go ahead and press that. And what it just did, it just wrote all that XAML out for me, and I'm going to press Control K, Control D, and that's document format. And what you could see is it went out here and it made all of these, all this XAML here, and it added all these fields. See how it did all that for us? So that's pretty cool, right? The XamDataGrid did that. In fact, I'm in such a small resolution. Let me go ahead and set that up. All right, so now what I want to do quickly is just give you like a quick review of this project. Now this project there's a link in the online help that will take you so you can go get your own copy of the same exact project. All right. So let me move this over. Sometimes when I'm using the recorder, it doesn't resize right sometimes. I don't know why. Camtasia and Visual Studio just don't seem to get along sometimes. All right. So in this project, I'll just give you like a 10-second overview. First of all, there's a folder here for model, and we could see here, I'm going to go to order. And here you could see all the properties on order, right? So order's got some properties. Now, somebody may wonder why do I have order detail listed twice? Well, what I wanted to do was, the reason this is here is just to prove a scenario out that we could have multiple field layouts with the same type with different property names. And yes, it does work. I just wanted to prove it. And that's one of the things I did when we're developing this application. So here's all of these properties. And of course, you could see, you know, like over here, you've got a customer. So let's wander over here to the customer. And we can see here that it's, you know, just a regular observable object. And then its address is of type address. So you can see we have nested properties here. And that's how the address is set up, right? Okay, so I just wanted you to see that so you know where things are coming from. The other thing I wanted you to see here is on the views. So let's go down here to view. This is the view we were just in. And you can see it's code behind, doesn't really have anything. It's just pretty much empty, like a lot of MVVM apps. So over here, this is the view model. And you can see that these are the properties here that were exposed on the model, right? So now you can fully understand what's going on. So you can see that here's our collection of orders, and then later on in other videos, we're going to be able to set up bindings for the customer statuses, and for these order statuses, and for the sports combo boxes, and I'll explain all that later. Of course, here's a list of states. All right, so let's go back over to here to our application, and you can see that once the XAM editor got a chance to reload itself, you can see that the XamDataGrid was live. So the reason that this is live now, because you're probably wondering about that, is right here. So up at the top, from my user control data context, I'm actually instantiating the view model. In a real app, you would never do it this way, right, for any reason. Because most view models have things in their constructor that are required. In my case, it's not, because we're just doing a demo app so that we can have something nice for you. Okay, so in the next piece that I would like to talk about is the layout of the configurator. Now that we've covered that little intro to the app and data binding. So here in these sections of the configurator, what we have is, of course, we have our tabs. And then, as you know, ribbons, where they have a colored area, that always denotes that these are contextual tabs. Same like you have in Word and Excel, right? Or PowerPoint. All right. So these are the tabs, and this course would be the ribbon. Now, the tabs and the ribbon are all context sensitive. So if I was to click on, for instance, order layout, notice that they change immediately based on what's selected. Of course, if you click on a field, you've got the field ribbon and then its contextual tabs here. All right, this area right here is our object tree. So this will be a tree of objects that would have your XamDataGrid, then it's collection of field layouts. Then within the collection of field layouts, you have all the individual field layouts that are down here. And then once you're actually selected a field layout, it'll list all the fields that are currently on glass over here, or that could be nested ones, right? But then also you have all the available fields that haven't been data bound that are available to be used on that layout. All right. In addition to that, we have this section which is always on the left side of the ribbon, or I'm sorry, always on the right side of the ribbon, which is where all of our help goes, and I'll go in more detail about that in a few minutes. And then, of course, over here is our property grid. All right. So in order to really understand and get the most out of this configurator, you really need to have a good grasp of the XamDataGrid object model. So let's just run over here and let's take a look at the online documentation. This is the help topic for the productivity tools. I'm in the configurators looking at the data grid. In this case, obviously it's a XamDataGrid, but we remove Xam on all these names to make it easier. Okay. As part of this topic, we've got a section on the XamDataGrid overview. And what I want to draw your attention to, besides all the text that hopefully you will read, is this image which shows a chart of the object model of the XamDataGrid. All right, so the XamDataGrid has a property for each of these. So there's a property on the XamDataGrid that's of type field layout settings. And of course, that's where the field layout settings object is on that in a property on this. Then there's a collection for field layouts on the XamDataGrid. There is a property of type field settings on the XamDataGrid, and there's a property of type view settings. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to flip back here for a second to our control configurator, and here's what I want you to see. The tabs are those high-level properties. So you could see for the XamDataGrid, that's what we've got selected. How do you know it's selected, Carl? Well, because first of all, it's colored, right? Second, because over here in the property grid, this is the selected object. It's always listed over here. Up here in your Contextual tab, the title is XamDataGrid. So we've tried to make it so it's really obvious as to what's selected, because obviously we've got quite a lot of things going on in this application. But if you want to look at the field layout settings, you can click here, and then you're going to get the Contextual tab for the field layout settings. And then, of course, you're going to see all the properties for the field layout settings. Same thing with view settings, field settings and view settings. All right, so let's bump back over to here to our chart. So we can see here the XamDataGrid has these layouts, the field layout settings, field settings, and view settings are all accessed via a tab once you selected the XamDataGrid object, as we did. Now, so in that object tree, in our configurator, which is over here on the left side, it has our field layouts collection. And within this, there is one or more field layouts. Each field layout has field layout settings, and a collection of fields. Then within fields collection, each field can also have field settings. So let's review that real quick. So over here, when I've clicked on a layout, an order layout, it selected the order layout. So we can see we're on a Contextual tab, field layout. Over here, we have order, field layout, properties. So we know exactly what object is selected. Order, field layout is selected. We also see up here that field layout is the object that's being that's up here in the Contextual tab. So now we have a field layout tab, and then we got the field layout settings and the field settings. So you can see that how all this works. Then the fields collection is right here. See, it says fields. So down here, these are all the fields, the individual fields. And if I click on a field, notice here, order ID from the order layout, the field properties. So this guy, these are the field properties from the order ID on the order layout. And these are all of its properties. And here's our Contextual tab for field. This is the field ribbon. And then that field also has a field settings object, which is over here. So if we run back, we can see this is exactly how we have represented this object model, how we've represented it in the UI. All right, so now as an observer, you would look at it and go, well, how come there's a field layout settings here and you got one here? What's up with that? Well, the way first of all, the XamDataGrid is a very rich piece of software. It's incredibly powerful. And so what the architects of the XamDataGrid allow you to set field layout settings at a high level, if you will. Let's use that terminology. Then all the field layouts, because remember, this is a collection, you have one or more field layouts. If you don't set any settings, if you just leave this defaulted, any settings that are here will automatically flow down and be resolved at runtime at lower levels. There's software and logic built into the XamDataGrid so that when it goes to resolve these properties, it looks up the tree to find out if it's been set. Now, if it's if it's been set locally, then it doesn't have to look up because it will use the local value. So essentially what this allows you to do is to set some properties in field layout settings, have multiple field layouts, and then have that same properties that you set up here set down here and have different values across different field layouts. Same thing with your field settings, right? So you could have your high level field settings that then each field layout can modify the value set here in its own layout. Then each field is actually allowed to do that. So this is really important to understand so that when you're setting values at lower levels, remember these lower level values that you set are going to override what you set at your higher level. And then of course we understand now about the way the tabs work. When we're on the XamDataGrid, we're operating on these in the ribbon. These are the contextual tabs in the ribbon, and then we're on a field layout. These are our contextual tabs, and of course our fields is over there in that little list of fields that are down there, and then each one has its field settings. Okay, so what I want to talk about next here is, so we talked about this object model. Let's go back up here to the top, and what I want to talk about next is the ribbons themselves and how values are set using the ribbon. All right, so one of the things you have to keep in mind is that this object model is incredibly rich, right? And because of that, one of the things that we wanted to do when we architected this configurator was to try to surface common properties in a higher level location to make it easier so that developers wouldn't have to visit all of these different tabs to get the behavior they need. Let me give you a great example. All of the tooltips on the ribbon, they all say the same thing. They give you the actual property name, they say if it's nullable or not, and they also indicate where that property lives. Now, I'm going to just get off there and come back here to bring it up. You could see here that the property is on the field settings object. So allow edit is not on the XamDataGrid, it's on the field settings object. Now, if I come over here on allow add, I want you to notice one thing. So allow add new is a nullable Boolean property on the field layout settings. So even though these two properties are on the DataGrid tab, DataGrid ribbon tab, they're actually reading and setting values on other objects. And we did this because we have a little editing group, and now everything that deals with editing is in one place, and you don't have to know or you don't have to visit the different objects to get the behavior you need. Now, of course, if you come over here, allow add, and you type the word add, you're not going to find it in the XamDataGrid property, in the property grid, because that property is not on this object that we're on, but we've surfaced it on the ribbon to make it easier for the developer. Okay, so let's talk about the ribbon and how. So now we understand that we can read the tooltip, we can read about the property, we can read its full name. So where you can see allow add, actually the property is allow add new. So we've just, like on a few of the properties, we have a little bit shorter version, or we reworded it slightly to make it a little bit easier to understand at a higher level. That's why the ribbons are a little bit different. But on the tooltips, we put the actual property name, we say if it's nullable, and we also state what object it's on. And then there's some additional notes, because each of these could have some little bit of additional notes. And this one is just saying this checkbox has 3 states. When null, the default value is used. Okay. So what I want to talk about first is I want to talk about tooltips. So let's go over here for a second, and we're going to read this tooltip. So allow clipboard operations, that's the actual property name, is a property on field layout settings. Okay, now we know what object it's on. And the allow clipboard operations enumeration, okay, now we know it's an enum, is a flags enum. So we know flags in a flags enum in C# that allows us to select one or more values. So in this case, it's telling you that the cut, copy, paste, or clear contents values can be multi-selected. See where it says that? So what that means is I can come down here and I can multi-select or unselect from these last four values. Now, if I just say, oh, I just want all, then it'll close, of course, and it'll select all. Or if I select none, it'll do the same thing. Or if I start selecting values and then I deselect them, it'll select none for me. So this is how one of these flags enum multi-select work in the configurator. All right, so now I want to show you another example of a flags enum, and it's right here, and it says auto size options. I want you to notice that it says auto size options is a nullable enum that is a flags enum. So now, because it doesn't tell you what object it's on, well, it's because we're on the field settings tab. That's where the property lives, okay? So it says returns or says what values are considered when auto sizing a field. So it gives you a little bit of information. And then it says what values you can, multi-select, right? Data cells, filter cells, labels, summary values can be multi-selected. Well, because it's nullable and the default value is null, notice null is there, is available for you to pick. All right, so how does this work? Well, it's the same as the other one. I can select all. Okay, great. Or I can select none. Or I can come over here and I can select those. And if I open it back up, of course, they're there. And if I do like this, notice it goes back to none. What's the default value, though? Null. So as a developer, you need to know whether you want this to be none, all, none, or multi-selected. So if it's nullable, we need to give you this option to make it null. I just want you to be aware of that, okay? All right, so now let's talk about the single select ones. So over here we have a single select. Here, I'll come up here and you can see it says add new record locations or property on field layout settings. So it tells you where it is, but it's not an enum, right? Because we didn't come out and say that. It's not nullable. So you can just select one value and then it closes, okay? All right, now what I want to talk about is the three-state checkboxes. So notice here that this here says allow edit is nullable. So we know if the property is nullable, then of course it's going to be a three-state checkbox. So you can select either true, false, or none. So right now it's selected true. That's null, and that's false. So you've got all your three values, your three states that you can select from. Now we've also got some two-state checkboxes. I think they're over here in field layout settings. No, they're on the field. I had to remember where they were. Is enabled and is tab stop. So those are just, see, it says is enabled determines if cells on this field are enabled. So it's a two-state checkbox. Same with tab stop. But then you've got these other ones that are three-state. So you just need to be aware that when you're working with each of the controls, that you make sure that you select it correctly, right? All right. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is getting help. So we recognize that the XamDataGrid is incredibly rich and powerful, and it's got a vast API. And so what we decided to do was that for we could see that on the XamDataGrid, we're on the grid tab here, we have properties from multiple objects that are being set, right? We all recognize that that's how this works. So what we did was, in addition to giving you help to get directly to the XamDataGrid help or the control configurator help, we also give you the ability to go directly to field layout settings, field settings, or view settings. So if you've got yourself a property, for instance, add new, okay, what's this add new about? Then you can read about add new on field layout settings. So then you can come over here to field layout settings and start your search to get all the information about the add new and how does add new work and what are the requirements, what are the data requirements of the XamDataGrid for using add new. Now, if you've got yourself a question about the XamDataGrid, not the configurator, but the XamDataGrid, use the XamDataGrid support link here. This will open up, take you right to the forums. You just go ahead and log in and put your request in there, put your your query, and we'll get back to you. The support teams will be right on top of it for you. Now, another way you can get help, you probably noticed this when I was over here. See a little question mark? So what that does, see this here is going to take you to the XamDataGrid help topic. This will take you to the field layouts help topic, and this will take you to the field layout help topic. So we try to surface help in as many places to make it easy for developers to master the APIs and get the predictable results that they're used to getting from Infragistics controls. All right, thank you for listening to this video. We have many more XamDataGrid Control Configurator videos, and enjoy configurators, WPF, and Infragistics controls. Thank you.